Ilex Cornuda Burfordii, Burford holly. Ilex Cornuda Burfordii, Burford holly. Tree form, very, very common holly in the landscape. A couple of neat features. Now before I tell you the features, just as a reminder, it's this one and the Dwarf Burford, Ilex Cornuda Dwarf Burford, that are going to be most similar. And the main feature is not just how big the plant gets, but it's about the size of the features themselves, okay? So how do we identify Ilex Cornuda Burfordii, all right? These very large leaves, simple, coriaceous. Coriaceous is a term that means thick and leathery. So a lot of our evergreen broadleaf shrubs and trees that have evergreen foliage are going to have coriaceous, thick, leathery leaves. But a couple of things. All right, one, let's take a look at the size. These leaves are, if you use your finger as a reference, about 3 inches long. All right, 3 inches long. They are bullate. Bullate, of course, meaning blistery, and that's just where the veins are sunken into the leaf blade, giving it kind of a blistery look. But notice that they're kind of cupped or scooped. They're not flat. All right, they're not flat. Now, Super Bowl was a couple of weeks ago, but I don't have to have the Super Bowl to love dip. I absolutely love dip. And what these leaves remind me of are those Frito-Lay scoops. You get all that dip, So these are like the Frito-Lay scoops. They're not flat, they're these cup-shaped leaves. Here's another one, good example of that cup-shaped scoop of the leaves of Ilex Cornuda Burfordii. All right, now, a couple of other things. Again, 2 to 3 inches long, bullate or blistered. Look at that, one terminal spine is most common. One terminal spine right there. You can see it on these leaves. The fruit on Burford holly are going to be very large, very large. Marble-sized compared to the pearl-sized of the Dwarf Burford. The Dwarf Burford's leaves are also going to be, these are sharp, by the way. The Dwarf Burford are also going to be about half the size of the leaves, okay? So, in review, Ilex Cornuda Burfordii, oh, look at that. I told you they're sharp. Ah, my goodness, the things I do for you. Okay, oh, the scoop-shaped leaves, bullate, marble-sized red fruit, tree-form holly, Ilex Cornuda Burfordii, and they will make you bleed. Ilex Cornuda Dwarf Burford. Ilex Cornuda Dwarf Burford, Dwarf Burford holly. Now the first thing I want to say about Dwarf Burford is if I step back and you take a look at the size of this dwarf plant, and that's a good example of how dwarf does not always mean small, okay? So even Dwarf Burford holly can still get 20 plus feet tall and be a tree form itself. Most notably, however, Dwarf Burford will be found as a shrub, or at least maintained as a shrub in the landscape. Okay, so where does the name come from? Well, that's going to be one of the key ID features. All right, come on in. The dwarf part comes in relation to another holly, Ilex Cornuda Burfordii, the Burford holly. So by dwarf, it's the features of this one that are smaller than the Burford holly, therefore making them dwarf by comparison. It's not meant to be that the tree or plant itself is actually dwarf. Okay, so I'm going to take a sample here so we can get an up close. All right, a couple of key ID features on Dwarf Burford holly. All right, these leaves are about, look at that, about 2 inches long. 2 inches long. And can you see the blisters? The blisters of the leaf, and if you rub it, you feel those blisters. And blistery texture is a term for that, and it's called bullate. Bullate, B-U-L-L-A-T-E, okay? And bullate just means blistered. So if you feel or even look, you can see the bubble-like texture of the leaf. And folks, what that is the veins in the leaf that are sunken into the leaf blade, creating that blister-like appearance. They're truly not blisters. But 2 inches, blistery or bullate texture. Notice the number of spines on Dwarf Burford, Only one terminal spine at the tips. And then lastly, the fruit. Heavy, abundant fruit producer, pearl size, small red fruit. These features will be opposite for the Burford holly, which is the one that we're going to compare Dwarf Burford to. Ilex vomitoria, Yaupon holly. Ilex vomitoria, Yaupon holly. Now this is going to be one of our native hollies, and as you can see next to me, this is a tree form. So this is one of our tree form hollies. Now, a couple of neat things to identify Yaupon holly that separates it from all the others, I hope pretty clearly. Okay, come on in and take a look. Now I've got this sample broken off, and how does that look against the tree? Oh yeah, that's pretty good. Now, leaves are alternate, simple, evergreen. We know that to be true for all the hollies. And with Yaupon holly, these leaves are going to be 1.5 to 2 inches long, and they're going to have crenate to slightly serrated margins. Crenate to serrate margins. Oh yeah, I can see that pretty good in the video there. Yep, crenate to serrate margins. They do not have spines on the margin like most other hollies do. Crenate margins. They're going to be elliptical in shape, so that means broadest in the middle, kind of tapering to both ends. And one of the other neat things, if you zoom in enough, I think you can see that, the twigs, yeah, look at that. The twigs themselves, the stems, are gray in color, all right? Gray twigs, gray stems. See that, gray stems? Commonly have purple petioles, and then these elliptical crenate leaves. All of those things say Ilex vomitoria. Now, there's another unique feature about Ilex vomitoria. Just stay right there, Becky, with the film. And I'm going to, with contrast against the bark, hopefully that's a good thing. Oh yeah, look at the fruit. Look at the fruit. Folks, these pearl-sized red fruit for Ilex vomitoria, the Yaupon holly is the only holly that we will do that has glossy, shiny fruit. And thank many things today for the sun shining, but one of the great reasons is that the sun reflects the glossiness of the fruit. All other holly fruit are kind of a dull red or purple, but these are bright, shiny, pearl-sized red fruit for Ilex vomitoria. All right, now keep in mind that when we learn species types of hollies being dioecious, that means they're also male Yaupon hollies that will have no fruit, but the vegetative features would be the exact same. So anytime there's a straight species of a plant taught for holly, there could be male and female, meaning fruit or no fruit. But with cultivars, you're guaranteed male or female, fruit or no fruit. All right, Yaupon holly. Ilex Latifolia, luster leaf holly. Ilex Latifolia, luster leaf holly. This is going to be a tree form holly, and it's going to be one of the largest leafed hollies of any that you will find for use in the landscape, right? And that should be one of the key ID features that makes this pretty easy to identify, okay? If we take a look, I'll start right here from the tree, and then I'll show you a sample. Look at the size of these leaves, okay? Now, there are a couple of neat things I want to point out to you before we talk about the fruit. Let's take a look at my clipboard. And I got a couple of different leaves here. All right, look at the size of these, okay? Right, is that good right there? Oh yeah, perfect, right there. Now, these leaves are, oh, let's see. Let me guess how long they are. Oh, guess. Oh, let's see, what is that? 3 inches? Oh no, that's more than that. Why guess when you can measure? Look at that. Oh my goodness. 5 inches. A 5-inch leaf. Oh, right there. It's perfect. Look at 5 inches. Okay? The largest leaf of any holly that we have or will do. Now, the other thing is take a look at the margin. All right? And I will come in and, oh, look at that. Look how small the serrations are on Ilex Latifolia. If you were to count the serrations, you would average about 24 serrations on each side of the leaf. By far the most serrations on any holly that we've done, coupled with the fact that they're 5 inches in length should make identification of Ilex Latifolia pretty simple. All right, pretty simple. All right, then the last thing I want to show you is the fruit. And these are some of the most heavy, abundant fruit-producing hollies. And late in the season, the birds have kind of already taken them or they've fallen away. But look at those big clusters of red fruit. Very common for Ilex Latifolia, luster leaf holly. Face masks required to use this space regardless of activity except plant identification. This is Ilex Opaka American holly. Ilex Opaka American holly, truly a tree form. This is going to be one of our largest hollies, period, but it's certainly our largest native holly, easily 30 plus feet. Over 100 cultivars of Ilex Opaka, okay? A lot to choose from in that. We'll talk about that later. For now, how to identify Ilex Opaka American holly, okay? So coming in, what I first want you to notice is the irregularity of the spines on the leaves. Now, what I mean by that is even just looking at this one branch, there are some leaves that have 1 or 2 spines at the tip. There are other leaves that have 4, 6, or 7 spines at the tip. Lots of variation. There's a good example right here. You can see that against my shirt. Okay? So Ilex Opaka have large spines, several millimeters in length, much larger than Savannah holly, for example, and the spines are random in their number on the leaves themselves, from 1 to maybe 6 or 7, all the way from the base to the apex of the leaf can you find those spines, okay? Now, keeping in mind that as a straight species, there can be male or female Ilex Opaka. This one does appear to be perhaps a male because there aren't any fruit, but there are a couple of fruit there, okay? Now, there's a couple of explanations for what that could mean. This could be a male holly, but still produce a few random fruit. We'll talk about that when we talk about this plant in lecture, okay? But for the most part, on this one, I do not see fruit. However, I can show you another Ilex Opaka that is loaded with red fruit, all right? The fruit on Ilex Opaka will be red. The last thing I'll mention about this tree form native holly, in addition to the large random spines, is characteristic dull, dark green finish on the foliage. Really dark, dull green foliage is characteristic of these oval-shaped leaves with large variable spines. Ilex X attenuata Savannah, Savannah holly. Savannah holly is going to be a tree form, all right, and it's also going to be one of our red fruited hollies. So how to identify Ilex X attenuata Savannah? All right, well, as we know, the leaf arrangement of all hollies is alternate. All the hollies we're going to learn are going to be evergreen, all right, and all the leaves are simple. So with that being said, just as a reminder, all of those features are true for Ilex X attenuata Savannah. So how are we going to identify it? Let's first take a look at the fruit. Heavy, abundant fruit producer with Savannah holly. The fruit are going to be pearl-sized, and we kind of always reference fruit size with pearls or marbles, but these are kind of smaller fruit, but very abundant with Savannah holly. That's a given, all right? Savannah being a cultivar, you can always rely on them being fruit-producing plants, okay? So, taking a look at the leaves. Characteristically, I think a good representation of that is going to take a look. Here are the leaves about 2 inches long. And notice the spines. Maybe I can put it against my shirt for a better representation of that. The spines are going to be very small, but they're going to be scattered around the entire margin of the leaf. Small spines scattered around the entire margin of the leaf. And one of the other really cool things about Savannah holly, maybe Becky can catch that from the side, is the end of the leaf has what's called a drip tip. All right, there it is right there. See how the tip of the leaf when it's held flat, the tip of the leaf dips down. It's called a drip tip. Imagine there being heavy dew or condensation on the leaf, and that little roll of water, bead of water would come right here and roll off the tip. So Savannah hollies, oh yeah, look at that angle right there. You're a great videographer. This is great. Look at the drip tip on the end of those leaves, small spines scattered around the entire margin, heavy, abundant, pearl-sized red fruit, tree form, Ilex X attenuata, Savannah. Ilex Nellie R. Stevens, Nellie Stevens holly. Ilex Nellie R. Stevens, Nellie Stevens holly. Going to be a tree form holly, one of the most popular, most heavily sold, heavily used of the tree formed hollies, primarily for screens or for specimen plantings. So a lot of utility for Nellie Stevens holly. All right, well, how are we going to identify this plant? It's got a couple of really neat features I think will make this one separated from all of the other hollies we're going to do. All right, first, these leaves are going to be 3 to 4 inches long. So it's got some of the larger leaves of any holly that we've done. And there's also going to be the noted really shiny. Look how glossy and shiny the leaves are. That's not true for all the hollies. And it may not be the best feature to start with, but it's one of many that always kind of point out Nellie Stevens to me. So really shiny, shiny foliage, all right? And then take a look. All right, now I'm trying to hold this steady. The leaves up front are going to be kind of flat. And by up front, I mean at the tip of the branches, kind of up flat, about 1 spine, all right? But notice as you move down, and I'll just keep the branch steady and let Becky work the camera, you start to see several leaves that twist and spiral. Look at that. These twisting, spiraling leaves. It's not an insect damage, it's the natural form of the leaf. Here's another one right here I'll take off just so you can see. Those twisting, spiraling, curled up leaves naturally on the plant. All right, can you see that pretty good on the video? All right, notice the large marble-sized red fruit. Nellie Stevens holly are known to be very abundant fruit producers, and they're about marble size, some of the larger of any of the holly fruit. Okay, so far we've got 3 to 4 inch leaves, kind of flat at the tip of the branch, coming up lower or older foliage starts twisting and spiraling. And then I'll, just so you can see, here are those twisted spiraling leaves here on the clipboard. To hopefully get, oh yeah, see that? A good indication of the shadow. The shadow is probably the better thing to look at. You can see the twist and spiraling nature. Now, the last thing I want to mention to you that can be a key feature on Ilex Nellie R. Stevens is the placement of the spines, okay? Now, this is more of a trait for younger foliage, more juvenile foliage. I'm going to turn it upside down, so hopefully you can see from the shadow. But what we've got is the terminal spine here, front spine, and then a back spine right there, and a back spine right over here. So then, take a look. What you've got, here's the tail, here's the shell, here's the head, 2 front feet, 2 back feet. There's Nellie the turtle right there. Nellie the turtle. 2 front spines, 2 back spines, the petiole and the terminal spine makes it a turtle. You see it? 100%, right? No one disagrees. 100, yeah, you with me? Well, even if you don't, it's something neat to look for. That means 3 spines at the top, 2 at the back. Shell is the leaf itself, if that helps you. Otherwise, twisting, spiraling foliage, really glossy, 3 to 4 inches long, large marble-sized red fruit. All of that says Ilex Nellie R. Stevens. Lonicera fragrantissima. Lonicera fragrantissima, winter honeysuckle. Oh my goodness. This is a plant you're going to love, chances are, if you don't already know it. Winter honeysuckle. This is going to be a large, semi-deciduous shrub. All right, now semi-deciduous is just that it loses some leaves, but not all, meaning the same thing as someone may say semi-evergreen, meaning it keeps some leaves, it loses some. All right, so semi-deciduous, large shrub is winter honeysuckle. Now, come on a bit more. And first, I want to point out the leaves to you, and I'll use my pruners here to get a little sample of this. The leaf arrangement is very characteristic opposite. One of the best examples of an opposite leafed plant. Leaves are simple, all right? And tucked beneath those leaves in the axils of the leaf are these flowers, all right? Now the flowers are very, very abundant, all right? Very abundant. They're kind of a cream, yellow, white in color, but they smell remarkably sweet. And they smell like one of our favorite childhood cereals. I say childhood, I still eat it sometimes, so it's the favorite adult cereals as well. It smells like, oh, what is it? Is that Cheerios? No. Corn Flakes. No. Fruit Loops. It smells just like a bowl of Fruit Loops. More importantly, like the milk left behind after you eat the Fruit Loops and then you go to drink the milk and it has that wonderful smell, identical to that. Winter honeysuckle, Lonicera fragrantissima, opposite leaves, winter flowers that are axillary, hanging down, pungently sweet. All of those things can identify Lonicera fragrantissima. Juniperus virginiana, eastern red cedar. Juniperus virginiana, eastern red cedar. Now, this is one of the most common gymnosperms in the eastern United States, and one you're likely familiar with. A lot of utility, not just from an ornamental perspective, but also from the products that are made from red cedar. Got a lot to talk about with this tree, but for right now, what are the key ways of identifying Juniperus virginiana? Well, for one, we know that the genus Juniperus is dioecious. So learning a species type, we can always expect that there could be male or female, or properly said, pollinate staminae, and then seed cone plants, okay? So let's come on in and take a look. I'm going to first show you the key ID features for a mature red cedar, all right? And these do get to be nice sized tree, and one of the key ID features, first of all, is that scaly, but it's more like fibrous peeling nature of the bark of red cedar. One of the most unique features of any conifer, easy to identify all seasons of the year, is this very fibrous, almost kind of like burlap nature to the bark, okay? If you were in Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts, you may have learned that you can peel off these little flakes of bark, and they're really good to start a fire with, right? Very, very fibrous in nature. But this is only true when the tree gets to be mature, all right? Now, speaking of mature, come on in, and let's take a look at the scale-like foliage, all right? The scale-like foliage, all right? There may be a few awl-like leaves mixed within the foliage, but they're mostly scales. And this one is going to be a male. Notice the staminate strobili, all right? These match head, or about the size of the head of a matchstick, yellowish in color. Those are going to be the pollen-producing strobili. And then on another specimen, another tree, that was a female, this is an example of what the seed cone would look like. Bluish in color, about the size of a BB, all right? Maybe a pearl, but really like a BB, but that's the male and female. Now, what I also want to do, either one's fair game, but I'll be sure to show you both on the exam if that's possible. This is mature. Let me show you what a juvenile looks like, so come on over. A juvenile tree is going to be pyramidal, all right, broad at the base, kind of Christmas tree shaped, all right, and young Juniperus virginiana have lots of sharp, awl-like leaves. So if you touch or cut down a young Juniperus virginiana, you can actually get bitten by the foliage, okay? So young Juniperus virginianas can have awl and scale-like leaves, and this one happens to be a female. And you can see that by those bluish cones about the size of BBs. All of these features for young or mature eastern red cedar, Juniperus virginiana. I'm sitting down on the job, but it's for a very good reason. This is Jasminum nudiflorum winter jasmine, And this is going to be a ground cover, so what better way to teach it than by sitting down close to it. Jasminum nudiflorum winter jasmine. All right, so this entire hillside, and Becky can kind of pan over, this hillside, this is all covered in this plant. This is going to be a deciduous shrub that has a very pendulous kind of weeping habit. So one of the places it's used best is on a hillside where it can be planted, and then the foliage kind of spill down the slope or the grade. And that's exactly what's happened here with this winter jasmine, all right? So come on in, let's take a look. I'm gonna first cut a sample of the actual stem because this plant is still very much deciduous, all right? But take a look at the stem. And hopefully, and Becky, I'll let you tell me if you can see the features against my pant leg. We already had a discussion about one pant or two pants, pair of pants, but that's a different story, all right? The stems on Jasminum nudiflorum appear to be square. Do you see that? Yeah, I see it very well. Look right there. See those square stems? But folks, really what you have are decurrent leaf bases, because right here, and I'll let her hold the camera steady, right here's a bud, which is where a leaf will be. Here's a bud on the other side, so that tells you the leaf arrangement will be opposite. So at the base of that leaf, then you have that extension of the petiole, or what will be leaf tissue. So you're looking at decurrent leaf bases, and you can leave the camera still, and I'll move the specimen. Another example here. So bottom line, key ID feature for Jasminum nudiflorum, the squarish stems, and they have opposite buds, or what will be opposite leaves, okay? It's also worth noting that the color of the stems of Jasminum nudiflorum are going to be green, and they will remain green for many years, okay? Many years where they stay green in color. Not many shrubs keep their stems green, all right? Everything's blowing around. All right, now, the leaves. I mentioned the leaf arrangement is opposite, but when the leaves come out this spring, the leaves will be trifoliate. So they actually be compound leaves, and they'll be trifoliate, so 3 little leaflets. All right, so why teach it to you when it's naked? Well, it's because of the flowers. And if you pan over, and I want to get a couple of these flowers. Now, right against, hopefully you can see this against my pant leg, the flowers are also opposite, okay? Opposite flowers. Look at that sulfur yellow color. Really neat. Winter jasmine. It gets its name for the jasmine color of the flower, blooming here in the middle or the late winter. And can you look at the flower and recognize the flower shape? Can you see that? The flower shape is very characteristic salverform. Salverform flowers, and that is a long tube that flares out right at the very tip. Salverform flowers. Pure yellow, flowering precociously before the foliage appears on Jasminum nudiflorum winter jasmine. Pinus bungiana, lacebark pine. Pinus bungiana, lacebark pine. Folks, we saved the best for last. And while this one's not one of our native pines, it's certainly one that you're going to love, I think, and it's going to be super easy to identify. All right? Lacebark pine. Come on in. Now, let's start with our known characteristics of pine. The needles are in 3s, and I'm going to hold that right up there, so hopefully, Becky, how's that look?
Yeah, good.
Needles in 3s, okay? And the needle length is 3 to 4 inches. All right, so what does that mean? It means that we've got 3 needled fascicled pines. Pinus bungiana, let's say 3-4 inches. Pinus taeta, loblolly pine, at about 8 inches. And then Pinus palustris, longleaf pine, at 12 to 15 inches. So if you can count 1, 2, 3, then it's simply a measurement of whether they're under 4, around 8, or 12 plus. And that's the way to separate those 3 pines, okay? 3 needled pine for Pinus bungiana. But folks, let's forget about needles for a second, and let's hone in on one of the coolest things about this, and hence the common name, lacebark pine. lace bark pine. This has very smooth bark. It's not scaly or blocky like most other pines, but this Asian species has this camoed pattern that comes out after the tree is about a decade or so old. It takes some time, all right, but all good things come in time, like wine and people, right? All right, the better and better with age. And look up, if you just kind of pan up on this bark and see that camoed white and gray kind of patterns within the bark. And guys, imagine when I'm going to show you photos of trees this large that I saw when I was in China, and that bark gets even brighter, even more beautiful. So the key ID feature, quite truly, frankly, to the point with Pinus bungiana, the bark. That coupled with those short 3-needled leaves. And then of course, here we were lucky enough to actually see a cone. I'm gonna put the cone right against the bark, Becky, how about that? There's the cone. It's about 2.5 inches in length, similar in size and shape to some other pines that we've learned, but in conjunction with the leaf characteristics and the bark characteristics, should be no problem identifying Pinus bungiana, lace bark pine. Tsuga canadensis, Canadian hemlock. Tsuga canadensis, Canadian hemlock. Maybe one of the more fun genera names to pronounce. Tsuga canadensis. The only hemlock we're going to learn this semester, and this is a very important forest tree in the eastern United States. We'll talk a lot about that. All right, but how do we identify this conifer? All right, this is a tree form, actually one of the largest, tallest conifers of all the trees on the East Coast, okay? But come on and take a look. The foliage on Tsuga canadensis is going to be linear, and this linear foliage is only about a 1/2 inch long, okay? See that, about a 1/2 inch in length, bright green on top, and super bright, let's see, I'm looking in the camera, oh yeah, look at that, bright white below. Now, I'm sure at this point you're thinking, well, my goodness, there's 10 junipers or conifers that have green foliage on top and white below. How do you separate them? Well, a couple of neat ways. First of all, with Tsuga canadensis, they're only a 1/2 inch long, but if you come in and kind of look down the stem, what I hope you can see, and Becky, I'll let you confirm, on the top surface of the branch, there are several of these linear leaves that naturally turn upside down, revealing their white bellies without me having to turn them over.
Yep.
Can you see that? I'll hold it steady so that way the camera can be steady. There it is, right there. See right on the top of the stem, yeah, right there. Right on the top of the stem, there are a few leaves, that's perfect, right there. There are a few leaves that are naturally turned upside down, showing their belly. It's kind of like they're sunbathing, okay? This is the only gymnosperm that we've learned that has linear leaves where some of them are flipped upside down to show their white bellies. All right, very characteristic of Tsuga canadensis. The other neat thing about Tsuga are going to be the cones. All right, the cones are going to be really small, pendulous, hanging down. They're only about a 1/2 inch long, and they look like little honey pots or maybe even hornet nests. All right, and they persist on the tree all year long, and they're great ways of identifying Tsuga any season of the year is looking at those small, pendulous, and they usually bear copious amounts of these fruit and keep them all year long. So the upside down, sunbathing linear leaves, plus those pendulous kind of hornet nest cones should hopefully get you to Tsuga canadensis pretty easily.